to grab a couple different tools that we're going to be using. Traditionally in ceramics, if you were trying to make a set of something, so a matching set that has the same size as far as height and width, you might use something like this tool. This is called a caliper. And this you can use to, say I already have one mug made and I want to make a matching mug. I would take the mug that I have made and I would measure, pretend this is my mug here, I would measure either like this or twisting them this way, how wide it is. So I would measure how wide. I could also measure how tall if I want to make sure they're the same height. And then I could use that on my wheel to measure. Does that make sense how these work? Since I only have one of these, you can also use a ruler to do so. So I have these little rulers. They are in that top drawer right behind Gavin, on the right side of that sink, a whole bucket of rulers. I don't think there's room to put them on that shelf over there, so they will be in the drawer. You can use these to measure the height and the width. And from your sketches, you might already have your height and width decided, so that you can measure as you go. Another tip to getting these all the same is to use the same amount of clay. So make sure when you're measuring your clay, you, you make sure that you're measuring the same amount. Or maybe I can just make this one. We had these two don't work and I don't know why. I haven't figured it out yet. I should probably do that. So making sure that you're measuring as well as using the same amount of clay each time, it will help you get 4 mugs that are the same size and shape. So like I said, I'm using a pound of clay. It might be helpful for you to write down how many pounds of clay you used the first time, because your first mug is going to be kind of the basis of all of your other mugs. So I would write down on my sketch 1 pound of clay, so that each time I measure out a pound of clay to keep it consistent. Now, as far as things we've learned since the last time I've given a demo, making sure that our clay is soft makes our lives a whole lot easier, and making sure that it's not too wet so that it doesn't rip also helps. You want to be able to move your clay pretty easily on the wheel. So if my clay is too hard and I really have to muscle it, it could fall off more easily, and it's a lot harder to get on center. Also making sure that after we put it through the pug machine, we are wedging. I put a lot of clay through the pug machine this morning and then wedged that one big ball of clay probably 50 times, and then cut it into 1 pound chunks. That way I didn't have to wedge a bunch of 1 pound chunks. And then we're coning up, and then I'm pushing back down. Some people have found that they like to use the heel of their hand, like I'm using right now, to push back down. And then once I get to the bottom of that dome, I'm just going to give it a good squeeze to make sure my hands aren't moving, and then make sure you're releasing slowly. If you get it to stop moving, but then I let go really fast, it's going to push it right off center. So I've got it in a nice dome shape. I'm going to karate chop the top using that knuckle on the side of my pinky to make a nice spot for my hands to go. Add some water, 3 fingers, start to push down in. If you get to this point and your fingers are going like this as you're trying to open, that means it is not on center. So you can either call me over for help and I can get it back into a dome shape for you. Whatever you do, just don't close it back, that hole back in on itself and create a big air bubble. I promise you, if you wedge your clay well enough, you will have such a more easy time centering. I'm going to go as deep as I think I need to go. And then I'm going to shut my wheel off, take my needle tool, check. I've still got plenty of space down there. Where'd that go? And that's about good. Then I'm going to take my 3 fingers, put them back in, and I'm going to slowly curl them towards me so that I'm pulling that bottom out, making a nice flat bottom for my mug. Now, I don't want to go too far out. Most mugs are very straight up and down cylindrical. If we start with too wide of a base, we're going to have a hard time getting much height. Now I'm going to go on the bottom. I'm going to compress my bottom by moving my finger back and forth along the bottom. And then I'm going to add some water. And I'm going to do my pre-pull. So my pre-pull, I'm going to use my sponge. I'm going to support on the inside. And I'm just going to, my bat pins are a little wobbly, but I'm just going to push. And what this is doing is straightening out my cylinder because it was kind of in a donut shape before. So I'm straightening out my cylinder and I'm also opening the top at the same time. If your bat pins are really wobbly and you need me to come tighten them, please let me know. All right, from here, I'm going to, a lot of us have found that we like pulling with a sponge, and I think it might work better as far as my preference, but it's kind of up to you what you like. I'm going to take my sponge. I'm holding my sponge, 3 fingers on top, my pinky and my thumb are on the bottom, and my middle finger is doing the most work here. So I'm going to push with my middle finger into the bottom. I'm still doing the same process. I made that little dent at the bottom. Add more water. I'm going to make sure that my elbows are down, they're close to my body, my nose is right over the rim of my mug. And I'm going to slowly lift up. As I get to the top, slowly release my pressure. Make sure you're thinking about the way that your body is positioned, making sure that you're really hunched over as you're pulling. And then if you feel like you're getting any thin spots, make sure that you're not pushing too hard in those thin spots. Too much pressure will cause it to rip. Now, if the walls of my mug are pretty much thin enough, my rim, my lip right here, isn't quite as thin, so I'm just going to give it a little squeeze with these 2 fingers at the top. And I'm going to go for one more pull. This pull probably won't give me much height, but I just want to make sure we're nice and even. All right, and then from here, here's where we start to decide what kind of shape we want to go for. I'm just straightening out my cylinder a little bit. It's a little bit wider at the top. If yours gets too wide at the top, you can take your hands. It's not quite the collaring method, but we're just kind of cupping it in to pull that back in. And then I'm going to think to my sketches. I think what I want to do is make a mug that comes out and then back in at the top, so I can show you both those methods. We're going to be using the same things that we learned with the vases, the collaring and pushing out. So from the inside, I'm going to very slowly push out. I'm using these 3 fingers on the inside. I made sure that I have enough water on my hands and my pot. This hand is on the outside supporting. Every time I do that, I'm gonna just take a look at it, make sure I like how it's looking. I'm gonna go out a little bit further. And then I'm kind of stopping right around here because I want to bring my top in. I'm going to use the collaring method, L fingers, these fingers tucked. And I'm going to collar this in all the way to the top. I don't really want a flare lip for my mug. If you make a big flare on the lip, it's going to dribble out the sides of your mouth when you try to drink out of it. So make sure the top is straight. You don't want it, like I wouldn't want to take this and flare it out. I'm just starting here where I want my neck to start to come in, and then moving my hands up to make it straight up and down. And I think that's pretty good. Remember, there's always a point where you need to stop. If you work with it for too long, you risk losing it. I'm going to make sure that all of my water is out of the bottom. And then since this is my first mug, I also need to measure it and see what I got. If you really want like specific measurements, you can measure as you go. I just decided to make my first mug and then try to make the rest of my mugs match it. So I got all the water out of the bottom. I'm gonna trim. Do some pre-trimming at the bottom so that I don't have a lot to do on the trimming wheel. And then I would take my measurements as well. So it's about 4.5 inches tall, and oh, you can see better on this side. About 3 inches wide at the lip. I could also, if I really want to get precise, my caliper, I could take this. This tightens it at the bottom, and I could figure out how wide my belly is. So I could take a measurement there, hold that at that spot, tighten it up. And then I could use this, double check it just to make sure I didn't mess that up. And then I could use this when I'm pushing out to measure my belly as well, to make it more precise. Questions on mugs? This is our first step. Later on, I'm going to show you guys how to make handles. From here, cut it off, put a bag over the top, put your name on the bag. We've been having issues with that. Please put your name on your bag. You can even reuse bags from the vases once we turn those in, because we'll let those dry out. So put your name on the bag and then put it on the shelf over there. Questions? You can even take a picture of it if you're really nervous about people stealing your things or accidentally taking your things. That's not a bad idea, is to take a picture of it too. Questions? All right, that's it. Oh, one other thing, sorry, before you leave. You should be able to make 2 mugs in a day. So we started with vases and we've only been doing one thing in a day. And I'm noticing that if we mess it up within the first 5 minutes, we take it off, we clean up our wheel, and we're done. If you want to, can someone grab me a wire tool? If you want to make more than one in a day, say I mess this one up, if I get this one and it's good and then I have time to make another one, just grab a new bat. But say I mess this one up, it looks not good, I want to take it off. We can just clean off the top here. You can take your towel, wipe that off. And then since I have some dampness on the bat, I don't really need to do the bullseye. I can just throw another piece of clay on here and make another one. So don't be afraid to try more than one in a day, especially if you mess up the first one Or if you make your first one really quickly, you can make up to 2 mugs in a day. So keep that in mind too. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks, guys. Work on your sketches if you haven't finished those. Make sure you turned in that discovery if you haven't finished that. Got more. There's clay under the wedging table.
Okay.
The first thing that I want to talk about is what I did this morning during my second hour class. I made this mug right here, and I want to try to make a mug that looks just like it, right? So what you are going to be using to do so are little rulers. The rulers are in that top drawer right there on the right of this sink. There's a whole bucket of them. And after I made this morning, I measured it and I wrote that down on my sketch so that I got the exact measurements that I actually made. So this is about 4 inches tall and about 3 inches wide. And then if you want to go a step further, this tool right here is called a caliper. And this can also be used for measuring. You can push it in and measure the top of things like that. Or you can pull it out and measure how wide certain points are. So I'm going to measure the belly of my mug to try and get the exact same measurement. So to loosen it, I use this right here, this little bolt. And to tighten it, I tighten the bolt and then it's in place. I know my measurements. So these are some tools that you can use along with making sure that you are using the same poundage, is that a word?
Sure.
Poundage of clay. So I used a pound of clay to make this. I'm going to use a pound of clay to make my next one. So I got those handy. I'm going to be using those to try and recreate this mug right here. I think I'm going to set that somewhere. All right.